Hi everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar, Engaging Supporters Beyond the Welcome Series. My name is Morgan Fletcher, and I'll be moderating our webinar today. I'm an Associate Client Manager at Change.org, where I work alongside the rest of our client services team to help organizations recruit high-quality supporters and develop email strategies to convert these supporters into long-term advocates and donors. With me today are two fantastic speakers who are going to share their insights into design for mobile, optimizing your landing pages, developing your one-time donors into sustainers, and improving donor retention after end-of-year giving. So with us we have Blake Groves, Vice President of Strategy and Business Development at Salsa Labs, as well as Tammy Ho, Lead Client Manager at Change.org, here with me in our New York office. I'm going to give it to Blake and Tammy each a moment to introduce themselves, and then we're going to get right into it. Blake, do you want to start?
Sure, that'd be great. Thanks, everybody. I am excited to be here. I've spent about the last 15 years working with nonprofits on their online strategies, how to engage, how to reach more supporters, get them more engaged, and drive more support. So I'm excited to talk to you guys today about end-of-year giving and some strategies to help us increase our retention rates.
Hi everyone, I'm Tammy, the Client Manager at Change.org, and I've been working in the digital marketing and fundraising space for 10 years, and I'm really passionate about all things email, so I'm very excited to be here today.
Awesome. Okay, so before jumping in, here's a quick outline of how we'll be structuring our presentations today. Blake is going to start us off with what's at stake during year-end fundraising and the realities of donor attrition. He'll share an overview of best practices for deepening relationships with new supporters and developing them into recurring donors. We'll take a deep dive into list segmentation and grouping for end-of-year donors to learn how to best facilitate this supporter evolution. Blake will answer questions such as, what steps can I take early on to minimize donor attrition? And how do I segment my end-of-year supporters to develop them into recurring donors? And then Tammy will take us through with the discussion of how to craft the strongest mobile design for your messaging, as well as optimizing landing pages. This section will answer questions such as, what are the best practices for creating mobile-friendly emails? And after they've clicked through the email, how can I utilize landing page best practices to guarantee high engagement? We'll have time for a Q&A after Blake and Tammy have presented, so be sure to enter any questions you may have in the chat box in ReadyTalk, and we'll be able to address those later on. Also, if you'd like to share what you're learning with your followers, you can follow the hashtag #BeyondWelcome. And I'll let Blake take the reins from here.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. All right, so I'm sure it comes as a shock to no one on the call that the lion's share of your fundraising comes at the end of the year. Most studies show almost half of all donations come in the last quarter of the year, and interestingly, almost a quarter of all donations come in the month of December. So I'm sure everybody is busy gearing up for year-end campaigns, making sure we have everything in place. I'm a big supporter of that. It's obviously crucial to your 2016 budgets that we have a successful end-of-year push in 2015. Really what we're going to be all excited about, and the good news is that as we do this, you end up with a lot of new donors in January. So we're all excited. We have our celebrations. Everybody high-fives each other. I'm not sure exactly what organization this picture was taken from, but apparently they had a very, very successful end-of-year campaign. The bad news is as we take this set of donors and move throughout the coming year, we're going to actually lose the majority of them. And so this is something that we don't necessarily focus on as an organization, but it is something that we need to pay a lot of attention to. I'm going to give you some details here in just a minute and show you why this is such a big problem for organizations, and this is taken from studies across the board. But I can tell you most of the organizations that I have worked with personally continue to see this to be a problem, something that they need to put strategies in place to address. The numbers are not very good. Donor attrition is a very large problem, running around 60% on average. So the survey that these particular stats were taken from is of just under 3,000 organizations. You can see for every $100 gained, we lost 96, and for every 100 new donors, we lost 105 donors. So all that planning, all that work that goes into your end-of-year campaigns is really working to fill a leaky bucket. We're continuing to try to bring in new donors, which is something we want to do, something we need to do. But if we can address this attrition problem, it starts to pay dividends very, very rapidly. It starts to really increase how we can grow year over year. If we're not having to fill the 60% that we're losing, then that end-of-year push starts to really be what's truly net new in the long-term sense. And the numbers, although they're bad that we just saw, the numbers are also good on the flip side, which is by just tweaking your retention rate by 10%, you can double the lifetime value of your donor database. So I would guess if any of you were challenged by your executive director to say, I'd really like to double our lifetime value over the next coming year, that would seem like a daunting task. However, if we focus on just a couple of the key levers, with retention rate being one of the most effective, that becomes much more attainable, much more of a focused goal as opposed to this kind of nebulous attrition, how do I deal with that? I'm sorry, with this nebulous lifetime value, how do I deal with that? I can get much more focused on strategies and tactics around my donor attrition. So what are some of the things that we could be doing? Well, the first thing is to plan ahead. You really need to be thinking about this now. I'm guessing everyone here has plenty of extra time, resources, and things just laying around with nothing to do as we head into year-end giving. Obviously, I know that's not true. It's a matter of that we need to get focused on this and layer it into the work that we're already doing. We can't wait until the end-of-year campaign is done and then try to figure out what we're going to do to increase our retention rate, because we'll already be into the year and we will have missed some of the good opportunities that we can take advantage of. So planning ahead is the first thing. Focus on these end-of-year donors early. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. So jumping on right away, particularly in January, assuming that you've got a good program in place to acknowledge and thank on the initial gift. I'm talking about doing things beyond that. Then we want to make sure that we are doing the right sort of targeting and segmentation that will allow us to personalize and individualize the communications that we send to people. I can tell you, when I talk about email communications, the most common question I get is how much email is too much. People are worried about fatiguing their list. They're worried about the wrong number of emails going out and people being upset about it. And I can tell you the rate of emails is driven 100% by relevance, not by frequency. If you are sending interesting information that people are interested in receiving, they will receive it effectively as often as you want to send it. If you are sending information that is not relevant to the people that are receiving it, then once a month is way too often. So it's not about frequency, it's really about relevance, and that comes down to being able to target, segment, personalize, and really talk in as close to a one-to-one format as possible. Because we don't have the resources to reach out to every donor individually, we need to be able to do this through some automated and systemic communications. I understand that everybody is resource constrained, but we really need to be able to put in place the tools and systems that allow us to do this kind of communication as we move into the next year. All right, so I mentioned a little bit about targeting segmentation. Let's take a little bit closer look. One of the key things that I challenge organizations to do is to think of segmentation variables across 3 different parameters. That is, what are people interested in? So the most common one that you'll hear here are a great example. I shouldn't say the most common, but a really tangible example is dog people versus cat people. So I know there are both. I happen to be a dog person heavily. So I've got 3 rescue dogs right here sleeping around me as I present, as a matter of fact. So if they all start barking in a minute, you'll know that I'm telling the truth. But cat people will respond very differently to a message with a picture of a dog in it, and dog people will respond very differently to a message with the cat in it. And of course, as I said, there's both. But interest is, what am I interested in? Dog versus cat. long-term solutions versus immediate relief, research versus treatment, all sorts of areas that I can be interested in. The other one is what actions have I taken? And the most obvious one for us to take advantage of here is, have I donated? And we'll look at a couple of different categories as we go into this. But it could also be, have I visited your facility? Have I filled out a survey? Have I taken an advocacy action on your behalf? Lots of different actions that I can take that result in you being able to target and segment differently. And then the last one is honestly kind of a catch-all. So it could be, does it matter whether I have kids or not? Is that important to you in your marketing messages? Does it matter where I live? Maybe you only work in a small geographic area and it's really important that I live in that area. Maybe it matters whether I'm a veteran or not. There can be lots of different things that fall into this category, lots of demographic information around age, income, etc. But what I'd really like you to do is try to think of three categories of the top three segmentation criteria that you would have in each of these categories, and then start to utilize that in some of your customization and personalization. All right, so let's keep pressing on. We were talking specifically about end-of-year donors. So one way to do this is take all your end-of-year donors and basically put them into these three categories: first-time donors, returning donors, or reactivated donors. And from there, I can craft my messaging, my series, that automated series of messaging that's going to go out, to be very different amongst those three categories. With the first-time donor, it's going to be very similar to a welcome series. Hey, thanks for supporting us. Here's more about the organization. This is where your funds are being used. Here's how you can help out more. And quite candidly, we want to be able to really try to push that first-time donor very quickly into a recurring donor. Recurring donors, we're going to look at the stats here in a minute, but they perform so much better than just that initial donation, and that can really be a strong lever there on your retention rate. Returning donors, they're already well down that path. These may be worthy of some personal touch, depending on the size of your organization. These might be people that you want to make some phone calls to, drop some personal cards to, whatever the case may be. Despite the fact that I come from an online background, even prior to working with nonprofits and their online strategies, I'm a big supporter of multi-channel communication. So making sure that you're talking to people where it makes the most sense at the touch point that they are most interested in engaging with you. Reactivated also is a very interesting category. So you've got your live bunts and other groups like that within this space. Again, different type of messaging. Effectively, you'd say it in different words, but effectively saying, hey, we haven't heard from you in a while, and here's some of the things that have changed. We'd love to, we appreciate your support and love to get you back involved with the organization type approach. So this is one easy grouping to take a look at. What I would do here is I would use this as my first cut, and then I would try to layer in those different areas that we just looked at before. What are they interested in? What actions have they done? Miscellaneous. Figure out the ones that are going to make the big difference. I mentioned before dog versus cat. I can tell you that alone, if it's an animal-based organization, will double the response rate of the email. So it's important for you to determine what is the dog and cat within your organization. There will be an attribute that will significantly drive your engagement rate with your supporters. All right, moving on. I mentioned recurring donors. They really can be a silver bullet to increasing your retention rate. We saw overall retention rates are 60%. Attrition rates are 60%. Recurring donors have a retention rate of 70%. They also give higher average amounts. So this can really be the lever for you to drive up that retention rate and affect that lifetime value of your donor database. So let's look at this messaging series that I talked about. So really what you want to be able to do is go in here and you get your donations, and I'm going to assume that I've already segmented these out to new donors. You can actually do a couple of different things. We put another one up there at the top. So if I was looking to try to drive recurrence rather than new donors, I would have said donors who have given 2+ gifts in the last 2 years. So the series is the same, but the criteria that puts them into the series will be different. So this one here, we're looking at these new donors. So effectively, this is the welcome series concept. But again, it's really important that you understand this automated messaging series isn't limited to a welcome series or an onboarding series, as they're also called, but can be used to drive first-time donors to recurring donors, reactivated donors to recurring donors, whatever the case may be. So again, hey, thanks. We really appreciate your support. By the way, here's some things you might not have known that we're working on. So this would probably go out, I would say, roughly about a week after the first gift. It's going to depend a little bit on where you are in the calendar year. So if I get that first gift on December 23rd, I probably don't want this one to go out until January 2nd. Again, assuming that a acknowledgement and thank you has gone out ahead of this. So this series is beyond the acknowledgement and thank you. So you do want to adjust your timings a little bit as you get into the end of year. A week after that, hey, again, thanks. And we told you about Program A in the first message. We told you where your funds were going. We're trying to expand Program A into these new geographic areas because it will make this different type of impact to our constituents. And then a week after that, if you could make a $25 recurring donation on a monthly basis, it would help us expand Program A into the geographic area that we talked about and would result in these types of results. So I'm not going to try to tell you, obviously, how to write the copy, but the concept here is you strike while the iron is hot. We don't wait. We don't sit around and try to close out the year, and then we don't reach out to these people until the end of January or even maybe into February. And when we're doing that, it's an unrelated ask to the campaign that they perhaps donated to in December. That's kind of a worst case example, but I will tell you I run into it quite consistently where organizations will simply say, we need to raise money for the spring campaign. We're just going to email everybody. Everybody on the list gets the same email. Well, maybe I donated to Program A in December. You're not talking to me about Program A, and you're asking me to support something completely different, and you're asking it 8 weeks after I donated. You've really lost that momentum. It's kind of almost starting from scratch. I can tell you in a separate study, I found it quite interesting that one of the most common reasons that donors will say they did not renew in the second year is they did not even remember giving to the organization in the first place. So if that is one of the top reasons that donors don't renew, it does tell us as an industry we are not doing a good job of closing the loop and keeping these people informed and up to date as to what's happening as they move through the year. So I'm going to back up real quickly here just because I want to quickly again highlight, oops, too far. Make sure you have a plan that you're looking at this. Focus on those end-of-year donors and make sure that plan that I talked about is tied to those. So what am I going to do with those different categories of end-of-year donors? You can start to script the messaging now. You can start to understand the timing of the messaging now. You can start to understand what the ask is. I strongly recommend that the ask be around the recurring giving. Make sure you're personalizing it, and then we want to try to drive it through some sort of automated system wherever possible just to save on our resources. All right, I think we have a really quick poll here. If I scoot back over here. And so I'm curious of the people attending today, how many already have some sort of plans in place to increase their retention rate, decrease their attrition rate in 2016? And we'll let this go for just a little bit. As soon as we finish this poll, while we're doing that, I'll go ahead and set up the stage here. We're going to kick it over to Tammy, who's going to give you some really great insight into mobile and how mobile can affect both the stuff I just talked about. So all of the things that I talked about, mobile is going to be a key piece in making sure you're reaching the right people. But these are also some really great tips to help you increase that end-of-year campaign and those end-of-year results, which I'm hoping then feeds into this funnel of the campaign where you're trying to drive much higher retention rates. So this is good to see. We're running at about 50% are at least talking about it. So that's good. I will throw down as a challenge now, you really do at this point in time need to move from talking about it to starting to put some concrete plans in place so that you really can hit January full steam headed down this path. So if you see there, we're right at about half, roughly half, that are talking about it. Quite a few that don't have a plan. So the ones in column C definitely need to get moving, and congratulations to those of you in column A. All right, so hopefully I gave you some things to think about. Hopefully I've challenged the people in column B to move themselves into column A and at least column C into column B. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tammy, and then I will be available during the Q&A to circle back on any of this that anybody wants to talk about.
Thanks, Blake. So now that Blake's given everybody here some great email strategy recommendations, I want to dig deeper and talk about email and landing page optimization. So strategy and email and landing page optimization really go hand in hand. So they should be thought of holistically when you're planning your year-end campaign. Let's start with a fun fact. Did you know that 81% of people read their email on mobile devices? First of all, wow, that's amazing. I'm also not surprised, but knowing that makes me hope that all organizations have mobile-friendly emails, or at least are thinking about it. If your emails aren't optimized for mobile yet, your communications might be getting ignored by your supporters because they're having a frustrating user experience. If you've ever opened an email on mobile and seen a tiny, unreadable font and images that you have to zoom in on using your thumb and forefinger, you're having a frustrating user experience because you're trying to read a static email on a mobile device. Side note, everyone, when I say mobile device, I'm talking about phones and tablets. And another side note, the 81% stat that I cited is an average from a study. Your mobile audience might be different, so check your email reports or your analytics tracking to see your organization's benchmark. Now that you've got that knowledge in your back pocket and you're really psyched to revamp your emails, let's take a look at two types of mobile design. Fluid design builds emails based on percentages for resizing so that the elements are relative to one another. So when your web designer is building the email, they might say that the header should take up 15% and then the body should take up 30%, etc. So regardless of the screen size, the email will use those percentages to adjust itself. Fluid design doesn't alter the design of the email. It simply ensures that no matter the size of the screen, the email is going to stretch to fit it. Responsive emails respond based on the device, hence the name, and the layout is adjusted to maximize user experience. With responsive design, some of the elements might be removed, some of them might be scaled up, and then some might be stacked differently than in the static desktop version. Oh, let's stop here and do a quick poll. Do you use responsive email templates? A, yes, every email. B, we do sometimes, and then C, we would really like to start. So everybody get your responses in now. So far it looks like about half of you here are using responsive email every time, so that's amazing. And then we've got, a quarter sometimes and a quarter thinking about it. So that's great, and I'm glad we're having this conversation right now. So here's a responsive email example from our friends at World Wildlife Fund. On the left-hand side, you can see the desktop version. The main thing to point out here is the sidebar, which makes this a two-column email. Two-column, like the first column is that body of the email, and the second column is that sidebar. And on the desktop version, you can do this because you're afforded with more territory. And then on the right-hand side, we've got the mobile version. And there you can see that the design has been altered. So the sidebar has been moved under the copy as a call-out, and the donation button has been scaled up. Those double columns have been stacked, and they're now a single column. So all of those design elements are altered to improve readability and user experience. If you were reading that email on the left on your phone, the copy would be a lot smaller to accommodate the sidebar, and the donation button would be tiny, and that's not easy for users to click through. And then the images wouldn't be as vibrant because they're competing for space. So something important to remember is to run your fluid and your responsive email designs through an email testing tool like Litmus to make sure that they're rendering correctly. So moving on, here are some rules of mobile email design. Number 1, keep it simple. Avoid any clutter in your design. Ask yourself if it's necessary, and if it's not, take it out. Number 2, keep it concise. Everybody here knows that people have really short attention spans, especially when they're on their phones, so make sure that you're getting to your point. And number 3, use high-resolution images. Nobody likes a fuzzy, pixelated image, and you want clarity in your photos to support the story or the call to action in your email. And then include clear calls to action. The supporter should be able to look at your email for 3 seconds and know what you're asking for. And you can give them multiple opportunities by placing buttons and text links throughout your email. And then lastly, like we were just saying, use a single column design because it provides better readability and user experience like we saw in that example. So there are a few other levers that you can pull when it comes to email optimization. So don't forget these next few easy-to-do tweaks. Here we've got subject line and pre-header because you've still got to hook them so that they're going to open your email. Everybody here knows the power of a great subject line, and I hope that you've been doing testing to find out what works for your organization specifically. What I really want to focus on here is the pre-header. You can see in this example, there's the subject line, which if you can't read it, it says, if you're with Hillary, this is an email from the Hillary Clinton campaign. And then that pre-header that I'm pointing to there says, midnight deadline to help Hillary. So the pre-header is a short summary that follows a subject line, also known as the snippet. Most of the time, that pre-header is auto-pulled from the first line of copy in your email, and that's not always effective because some of the time it just says something like, Dear Tammy, and that doesn't provide a lot of context or entice your supporters to click through. So let's optimize it so that you're able to manipulate what shows up in that image. There are 2 ways that I like to do it. Number 1 is above the header as a call-out. This is usually where it says, view your email in a web browser in the template of an email. So all you need to do is change that copy to a call to action that coordinates with your subject line. So for example, if you're sending out an end-of-year appeal and your subject line is 2 more days, you can change your call to action / pre-header / snippet copy to say donate now, because those 2 things are coordinated and go hand in hand. Another way to optimize that pre-header copy is to set it up in the metadata. If you want the pre-header copy to be invisible in your template, so nobody receiving that email is going to see it, but still show up in the snippet for impact, you can ask someone who's familiar with HTML to set this up for you. It's really quite simple. Like I said, talk to somebody who knows HTML. It's just grabbing a snippet of code and then dropping that above the header tag and entering in the customized copy that you want to show up in the snippet. So before I forget, I wanted to mention alt tags even though we don't have a slide. Alt tags are an alternative source of information, hence the name, for people who've chosen to disable their images or perhaps they're on a slow Wi-Fi connection so that their images aren't loading. The alt tag appears when you hover over an image that's linked to a landing page. For example, if you've got an email appeal about saving the pandas, you'd want to add an alt tag to an image in your template that says, save the pandas, donate now, so your supporters know that they can click through to a donation page. Some people might argue that alt tags are old school because most people have their settings to automatically load images, but I say that it doesn't hurt to include them, particularly when your image is linked to a donation form or other call to action for your supporters. So text links, this one is pretty basic. The volume and frequency of email in general is quite high. So people might be opening your emails, but they might not be reading through all of your content. Emails email readers generally glance at the very top of the email and then at the very bottom. So place those text links strategically at the top and at the very bottom in the postscript, like WWF did in this example. So opt-out links. This one is self-explanatory. Opt-outs are required by the Can-Spam Act of 2003. And the good news is that most email platforms that you're going to be working with won't even let you send your email if they notice that you're missing that opt-out link. Nobody wants to lose supporters, but attrition, as Blake mentioned, is normal. So give supporters easy to find unsubscribe links because it's required. So those are some email optimization tips that I hope you'll consider as you look forward to your holiday and end-of-year fundraising campaigns. So moving on, now I want to discuss landing page optimization. So because email is just the start, what happens when supporters click through plays a really large part in the success of your campaign too. Here are some best practices to think about when you're putting together your landing page. Like email, keep it short, sweet, and engaging, and make sure that your content relates back to the email or you'll lose people. Again, it's that relevancy that Blake had also mentioned. And then mimic the look and the feel of your email to maintain a consistent user experience and stay on brand throughout your design elements for a really cohesive campaign. And consider the user experience. How's the font size and the clarity of the images? Are your calls to action clear? And are there enough opportunities for your supporters to click through to donate, or to sign the petition, or to share the content on social media? You might be experiencing some deja vu right now, and that's because a lot of landing page best practices are also email best practices. So to my next point, use web-safe fonts. Web-safe means that they'll render across all browsers. There's a whole list of font families out there which are considered web-safe. So the best thing for you to do is to talk to your web designer to learn more about that. And then lastly, set up tracking so that you know how your supporters are interacting with your landing page content. Measuring actions helps you understand what's working and what's not. A few examples of things to track are advocacy actions, donations, video views, and things like white paper downloads. You can take this data to create segmentation based on those behaviors, or set up automated email programs to move those supporters who take those very specific actions further up that ladder of engagement and closer to conversion. So most of you here will have emails that click through to donation or advocacy landing pages. So I wanted to highlight examples from two organizations. Our first example is of an advocacy landing page from freespeechforpeople.org. For context, their mission is to renew democracy and the US Constitution for the people and not big money and corporate interests. The screen on the left shows their responsive website homepage. When you click through on the call to action, help us restore our republic, it takes you to the petition page, which is shown on that right screen. The petition form landing page does a really great job of following through on some of those best practices that I've mentioned earlier. They've got a really clear call to action. Across the top it says sign the petition, and it's also branded to the red on their homepage. It's concise. It's just one sentence on why you're supporting the petition, and then two succinct bullet points on your reasoning. And then it's single column, because like we were talking about before, there's not as much territory as you have on desktop layout. And then this email keeps it simple. They only ask for 5 fields. I've worked with a bunch of organizations who stacked their forms with fields and drop-downs and checkboxes because they wanted to capture as much information as possible. And my recommendation is to streamline those fields to the ones that are really necessary, because you're going to decrease user frustration and increase the likelihood for conversion. There'll also be other opportunities in your communication down the road to capture that additional information from your supporters. So this is the landing page from that same organization when you click through the donate button on the home page. So when you click through on that Donate Now button, you'll land on this super sleek responsive donation form on the right-hand side. You'll notice that they don't even have an ask string, and they've focused on a $20 ask, and that's for a 28th Amendment to the Constitution, which is what they're asking for in that petition. Or you can fill in your own amount. The call to action is really clear, and it's devoid of any other distractions. So our next example is a fundraising appeal from World Wildlife Fund that I acknowledge you're seeing for the third time, but it's because it's that good. Here we've got the desktop version of their year-end appeal, which clicks through to their branded donation form. And I'm showing this donation form, it's their desktop version to keep it consistent, because that email was also the desktop version. So take a moment and imagine that you're the supporter clicking through on this email. What's the first thing that you notice? For me, it's the branded header. WWF has taken the look and the feel of that email with the polar bear and applied it to the donation form. Staying on brand throughout the campaign prevents the components, whether it's a form or a petition or even a social media image, from seeming disjointed. So let's take this one step further and break down their donation form, because they're doing a lot of things right that I want to highlight. So they've got this great header, which, as I was saying, was consistent with their email. It's branded to that email. There's a really clear call to action, and they've got that red ribbon at the top to bring attention to the deadline to make that tax-deductible gift. Below the header, they've got short copy to make a case for giving, and it's accompanied by the Charity Navigator and BBB logos that are really giving the organization some street cred. There's also an icon that shows the percentage of donations that go towards programs, and all of this provides the donor with confidence that their contribution is being put to good use. So moving on to the ask string section, WWF segmented their list based on giving history and used tailored ask strings to maximize their fundraising ask. Sometimes supporters aren't sure how much is the right amount to donate, so you can just help them by putting customized ask strings and defaulting to the average contribution you're seeing from supporters in that segment. Many of the people coming to your donation form are donors or supporters who are already subscribed to your email list, but there's going to be a group who doesn't fall into either of those buckets, and maybe they arrived through a search ad. These supporters have shown a really clear interest in your organization, so it makes sense to pre-check the opt-in box that I pointed to in that little arrow there, so that these people are receiving your emails. And of course, you'll have an opt-out mechanism in that email if they no longer want to receive emails. And then moving down to the payment option section, WWF provides donors with two payment options here, credit card and PayPal. So people use PayPal for two key reasons, for security and then for flexibility. While most donation forms you'll come across today are really secure and have Charity Navigator and BBB credits to give supporters peace of mind, adding a PayPal option could help lift conversion rates and even see donors who rely on the ease and security of PayPal to return. Lastly, they've got streamlined payment information to keep this a one-step donation form. Now is a great time to test as we're leading up to year-end giving season, and you can run these donation form tests manually, or I'd recommend a mobile and web A/B testing platform like Optimizely. One more thing I wanted to mention before I close out is that you'll notice this donation form doesn't have a navigation, nor does it have any sidebars, and that's because those are distractions. So I highly recommend running that test with your donation form. So, those are a few donations for optimization ideas that I'll hope you'll consider. And this wraps up my section, so I'll toss it back to you, Morgan.
Awesome. That was great and super informative. Thank you so much, Tammy, and also thank you, Blake. We're going to go ahead, actually, and open it up to questions. Quite a few have come through, but feel free to continue to send those along if you guys think of them, and we'll get to those as well. the first one here is for Blake. So Blake, I hope you're ready. It comes
Sure.
from Kenneth. Great. It comes from Kenneth, and he asks, do you have a preferred email distribution service, or maybe one that you feel does the job best, such as MailChimp, et cetera, or does it depend on the size of the audience that you're reaching?
I would say most likely for most people on this call, it does not really depend on the size of the audience you're reaching. You know, in the interest of full disclosure, I work for Salsa Labs, and we provide online marketing tools, so that's most likely going to be where I would tell you to go, and I would feel strongly about that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be working here. With that said, there are lots and lots of what are called ESPs, email service providers out there that can allow you to send messages. Where I think it gets more interesting is the ability to integrate nonprofit-specific information, such as who's donated and who hasn't donated, and allow you to quickly segment and target those. Again, the best practices that I've talked about honestly will work in any system. It's just sometimes it's more manual work of creating the list and the segmentation in one place and then pulling it into the tool in another. Probably don't want to go too much further than that, but happy to talk with somebody, individually about, where we might be able to help them.
Awesome. Thanks, Blake. And the next one up is for Tammy, and this one comes from Richard. And he asks, what is the ideal resolution for photos using emails to mobile devices? Is there a danger that it could be too high res or that it will cause low operating speeds?
That is a question that's really best answered by your designers. They'll be able to give you the best answer for that. I don't think that there is a resolution that's going to slow down speeds and prevent people from opening it. But again, I highly recommend a high resolution over a grainy, pixelated one.
And this one is actually a great question for both of you guys. It comes from Laura, and she says that she's not familiar with Chavity Navigator or the BBB logos. So how does she grab those? Because they seem really important.
Well, I would say if you just go to charitynavigator.com, you should be able to see if your organization has a rating there. And if not, I would contact them directly to make sure you can get that information, because they would be the ones, they provide the rating, and then once the rating is there, you should be able to get the icon.
Right, and then the same thing goes for the BBB, so just reach out to them.
Cool. And then another for the two of you. We've had a lot of questions come in about getting general support on email design when your team maybe has limited expertise in this field. Do you guys know of any tutorials or advice on getting set?
So let me, I think I saw that question coming through, and I totally understand that everybody is resource constrained. I do think if it's beyond the scope of your staff, it would be worth getting a generalized template for whatever email system you're using to have a mobile-friendly template that then you'd be able to reuse it throughout the year without expending any additional resources. It's also an area that I would look at to the earlier question about evaluating email service providers, that you would want them to provide you with mobile-ready templates. But if you don't have one or they're not providing one, and you need to spend the resources on one, the payback will definitely be there to at least get one that you could use throughout the year. You saw the stats. If you look at it the other way, imagine that whatever list you've grown, if somebody came in and said, I'm going to take 80% of your email list away, and then these are the people you're left to market to. So if 80% of the people are looking on a mobile device and you're not displaying there, you're going to have real problems. So it's worth that investment for a one-time template that you can reuse throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely agree with what Blake is saying. With that template, if you just have that template, you'll really just need to switch out your copy and then your images, and then you're set. And like Blake said, it's worth that investment.
Awesome. And then we have another really good question coming in here. This one's from Kevin, and it is for Blake. Blake, what would you recommend to improve attrition rates from contributions coming in from social media platforms like Good World, for example, that are impulse-driven as opposed to email or web-based asks?
That's a great question. I would still say, in general, I talk to organizations about trying to reach more people and trying to get them engaged is really the cycle that you're going through no matter what the channel or the medium. So I'm a big fan of multi-channel communications. So trying to get the person into a place where you can contact them outside of social media would be a great first step. In order to do that, you could have a specific confirmation page for social media donations that includes a strong ask for them to follow your emails. You could also just opt them in as part of the donation process, and then reaching out through those other channels to try to start a dialogue in some other mediums so that we're not only using the same approach. We try to get people across multiple touch points. That would be one of the first things I would do. The second thing is really the same concept, particularly if it's impulse-driven. There very well may be something inherent in the program that they decided to support, so making sure that your communication is staying relevant and focused around that topic.
Thanks, Blake. And then I have a really good one here for the two of you once more. Richard asks, do you have any data on countries other than the U.S. or Canada? Because he's interested in knowing if you find similar behavior and online giving patterns in other countries.
Something interesting, sorry, Blake.
Go ahead, please.
Something interesting that I've observed is that email fundraising is very big in the U.S., but it's still catching on in other countries where they're primarily doing fundraising over the phone or face-to-face, or what we call canvassing. And then Blake?
I was going to say that I don't have statistics at my fingertips. To your point, there are different approaches and methods. I think if you take a step back, the things we've commented on hold true, honestly, regardless of the country or the location or the social interaction. If you think about it in terms of, people want to talk to you about what they're interested in. They want you to talk back to them about what they're interested in rather than just you telling them you need money, and I'm being a little bit blunt there. And then secondly, the pervasiveness of mobile is really happening everywhere. So if you combine those two, it really doesn't matter if I'm talking advocacy here or fundraising in the UK or whatever the case may be. I need to get better at engaging my supporters, and I need to consider mobile as a part of that strategy.
Nice, great. And I think this looks like it's our last question. It comes from Tiara, and she asks, where can we find info on testing our subject line and pre-header for our org, perhaps beyond Optimizely?
So you can test your email subject lines within your email platform. Many email platforms offer A/B testing, and if it doesn't, you can just split that audience and test it head-to-head.
Great. I'm going to give another moment since we have some time here just to see if there are any additional questions being brainstormed but not yet relayed to us. So if you guys have anything else that you're thinking of, feel free to send that over. Okay, I'm going to close the questions out, but you guys can definitely reach out to the team. Thank you everyone so much for those great questions. And of course, a really big thank you to Blake and Tammy for taking the time to share your insights with us. Just so you guys know, we'll be sending everyone registered for today's webinar a recording of our presentations here, so be sure to keep an eye out for that in your inboxes. And if you have any questions that we didn't get to answer today, or you come up with something brilliant later, or just any general thoughts from the webinar, feel free to reach out to either of the email addresses listed on this slide, and we're going to get back to you as soon as we can. So thank you all so much. We're looking forward to seeing you next time. Have a good rest of your day.